Tonight, we slip into the warm, humid air of the Caribbean, where the stars hang low over an island shaped like a sleeping giant in the sea. This is Hispaniola, a place where you can almost hear the waves arguing with the wind, carrying centuries of stories across its shores. Before we begin, if this little corner of calm has brought you any comfort, feel free to like the video and subscribe, only if it feels genuine to you. No pressure. I'd also love to hear from you. Just drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always special to know we're all quietly gathered here from different corners of the world like a family, scattered but still connected. All right. Now go ahead and dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan or a soft hum in the background, something that feels like home. Nestle in, get cozy, and let's ease into tonight's story together. You trudge through the undergrowth of the early 1500s when this island was still reeling from the Spanish conquest. The Taino people, who had once fished and farmed in peace, now faced disease, forced labor, and the shattering of their way of life. Hispaniola became the very first colony of Spain in the Americas, the launchpad for explorers and exploiters spreading out across the New World. Gold was ripped from rivers, sugarcane took root where forests once stood, and enslaved Africans were dragged across the ocean to work the plantations. You can almost taste the bitterness of sugar mixed with sweat. Over time, something odd happened. Spain, in its endless empire building, got distracted. Ships sailed off to richer lands, Mexico, Peru, everywhere that sparkled with more gold. The eastern part of Hispaniola, the area that would become the Dominican Republic, was left to languish, surviving on cattle ranching and trade that sometimes slipped into smuggling. Meanwhile, on the western side, French settlers began to creep in, planting their own claims and filling their side with booming sugar plantations powered by the labor of enslaved Africans. The Treaty of Ryswick in 1697 sealed the deal. Spain recognized France's control over the West, birthing what would become Haiti. Suddenly, this one island was two worlds: Spanish in the east, French in the west, each suspicious of the other, like neighbors who share a wall but never a meal. As you wander along the border, you sense how different these halves were becoming. The east spoke Spanish, lived in scattered towns, and clung to cattle and trade. The west, under France, pulsed with plantation wealth, coffee aromas, and a massive enslaved population. This divide wasn't just about language or economics, it was about identity. People on both sides were shaping themselves in opposition to the other, even as they shared the same mountains and rivers. Here's a quirky tidbit: smugglers along the border would sometimes trade cattle for French rum hiding deals from Spanish officials by literally burying goods in the sand to pick up later. Historians still argue whether this smuggling was an act of desperation or quiet rebellion, but you can imagine the sly grins of those nighttime traders under a moonlit sky. The two colonies coexisted with tension and sometimes violence. French privateers raided Spanish towns. Spanish cattlemen retaliated by burning French outposts. Over centuries, the boundary hardened into something more than a line on a map. It became a cultural fault line, one that would shake again and again. You pause, hearing the faint sound of hooves in the distance. They belong to Spanish ranchers driving cattle, unaware they are part of a story that will twist far beyond their pastures. For now, Hispaniola is divided by fate, two halves growing apart, each shaping the destiny of the people who will one day fight, resist, and redefine what it means to be free. You wander forward through time, stepping into the late 1700s when the night sky over the western half of Hispaniola glows not with stars, but with fire. This is the Haitian Revolution, a storm unlike any other, a rebellion born from the cries of the enslaved who refused to remain chained. You feel the heat of burning plantations, the pounding of feet as people rise up, and the echo of voices shouting for liberty. The revolution, sparked in 1791, would sweep away one of the richest colonies in the world, and in doing so shake every slaveholding empire to its core. In the east, in Spanish Santo Domingo, you watch nervous eyes peer over toward the west. Here slavery existed too, but on a smaller scale. Cattle ranches and subsistence farming had never demanded the same numbers of enslaved workers as the plantations of San Domingue. Still, the uprising sent chills through the Dominican elite. The enslaved whispered about freedom, Spanish authorities tightened their grip, and fear rode the air like a storm cloud. Meanwhile, refugees, white planters, free people of color, and the enslaved poured across the border, bringing with them stories, wealth, and chaos. By 1804, Haiti emerged from this furnace of war as the first black republic declaring independence and abolishing slavery entirely. It was a triumph that terrified colonial powers and inspired the oppressed everywhere. You can almost hear the stunned silence in European capitals as the news spread an army of former slaves had defeated Napoleon's best troops. Yet the east of Hispaniola remained under Spanish rule, clinging to its old ways, watching its neighbor with a mix of admiration, fear, and resentment. Here's a quirky tidbit. During this era, Haitian leaders issued decrees banning white ownership of land, but some Europeans managed to bypass this by adopting Haitian citizenship under fake names, proving that even revolutions attract a bit of creative paperwork. Historians still argue whether these loopholes undermined the ideals of the revolution or simply showed how complex freedom really is. For a brief moment you might think the East could stay untouched, but revolutions are like waves. They crash, they spread, and they reach places you least expect. The Haitian armies under leaders like Toussaint Louverture crossed into Santo Domingo in 1801, seeking to unify the island and abolish slavery everywhere. You see Louverture ride in a figure both feared and respected, bringing change with him. Yet just as quickly, French troops under Napoleon's orders tried to reclaim control, reoccupying the east in 1802. The island was a chessboard, pieces moving, alliances shifting. Spanish colonists enslaved Africans, free people of color. Everyone was caught in this whirlwind. You can imagine a Dominican farmer scratching his head, wondering who was in charge this week. And as the fighting raged, disease, yellow fever, the unseen killer, claimed more lives than bullets. When Haiti finally secured its independence in 1804, the East found itself once again under Spanish influence, though weakened and uncertain. But the spark had been lit. The idea that an enslaved people could overthrow their masters and forge a new nation, it lingered in the Dominican air, a whisper that would never fully fade. You glance westward one last time at a nation born from rebellion, standing proud, yet isolated. Haiti's victory had not only changed the island, it had rattled the world, and the shockwaves were only just beginning to hit Santo Domingo. You drift now into the early 1800s, when Santo Domingo found itself in the middle of one of history's more peculiar chapters, a brief period under French control, a twist almost nobody expected. After Toussaint Louverture's forces had marched into the east in 1801 to abolish slavery, Napoleon Bonaparte, not one to let go, easily sent a fleet to reassert French authority over the entire island. You step into the streets of Santo Domingo, where French flags suddenly replace Spanish ones, and orders now come in the language of Paris rather than Madrid. The locals look around bewildered, as though someone has changed the rules of the game overnight. The French occupation was short-lived but intense. Under General Ferrand, the French tried to impose the Napoleonic Code and a new order, but they were fighting against more than just disgruntled locals. They were fighting nature itself. The tropical heat, the relentless mosquitoes carrying yellow fever, and the ever-present resistance from Haitian fighters made life nearly impossible for the occupying forces. You can almost smell the dampness of the soldiers' uniforms as they realize this Caribbean posting is no glamorous adventure, but a slow, exhausting struggle. During this time, the French abolished slavery in the East, continuing what Louverture had started. It was a radical change, freeing thousands and reshaping society in ways the Spanish authorities had long resisted. But the French also demanded loyalty, labor, and resources from a population that had grown weary of foreign masters. Quirky fact: some French soldiers, desperate to avoid combat with Haitian rebels, allegedly disguised themselves as local farmers, growing beards and speaking broken Spanish to blend in, proof that fear can turn even the proudest soldier into an actor. Historians still argue whether these tales are exaggerated or simply colorful truths passed down through local lore. The French hold was fragile from the start. In 1808, as Napoleon's wars in Europe stretched resources thin, an opportunity arose. The Spanish crown, weakened by Napoleon's invasion of Spain itself, became a rallying cry for Dominican loyalists. In what became known as the War of Reconquista, Dominican militias, aided by British forces eager to poke at Napoleon, rose up against the French. You hear the echo of gunfire at the Battle of Palo Hincado, where local fighters dealt a decisive blow. By 1809, the French were gone, retreating in defeat, and Spanish rule was restored, though not with the triumphant fanfare one might expect. The return of Spain felt less like a victory and more like stepping back into a dimly lit room you thought you had left forever. The colony was poor, neglected, and still recovering from years of war and upheaval. The Spanish called this era the España Boba, or foolish Spain, because they barely invested in the colony, treating it like an afterthought. You can picture a Dominican farmer shrugging as another flag is lowered and another raised, wondering if independence would ever truly come, or if the island was doomed to be a pawn in everyone else's game. As the dust settled, the east of Hispaniola was again under Spanish shadows, but the memories of French reforms and Haitian courage lingered. The island had tasted something different, something closer to freedom, even if it came with turmoil. And once a taste is given, it's hard to forget. You step back into the warm night breeze, hearing distant voices debating in Spanish taverns, Haitian drums echoing from across the border, and French curses fading into the wind. The island is restless, caught between old empires and new ideas, waiting for the next tremor to shake it awake. You move softly into the 1810s and 1820s when the Spanish flag once more fluttered over Santo Domingo, yet it flapped in a wind that felt strangely hollow. This was the era of España Boba, a time when Spain, exhausted by its own wars in Europe and rebellions across the Americas, seemed to forget about its little colony on Hispaniola's eastern side. You walk through the narrow streets of Santo Domingo City and see crumbling walls, underfunded garrisons, and merchants complaining that no ships come from Spain anymore. The colony feels like a ship left drifting without a captain. In this neglected atmosphere, the people of Santo Domingo began to quietly rethink their place in the world. With Spain offering neither protection nor prosperity, local elites started managing their own affairs, trading illegally with nearby islands, and even looking north to the emerging United States for commerce. Ordinary farmers drove their cattle as always, but they carried with them an increasing sense of self-reliance. You sense a new spirit forming, not quite independence, but the realization that maybe they didn't need Spain as much as Spain thought. The West, meanwhile, had transformed into independent Haiti, a nation under leaders like Jean-Pierre Boyer, who watched the East with growing interest. Haiti's existence was a daily reminder that freedom was possible and that borders were fragile. Some Dominicans admired Haiti's boldness in abolishing slavery and standing up to European powers. Others feared Haitian influence, suspicious of its military strength and its revolutionary zeal. These mixed feelings simmered in taverns, churches, and homes as neighbors debated what the future should hold. Here's a quirky tidbit: during these years of neglect, local militias would sometimes fire cannons during festivals using coconuts instead of cannonballs because actual ammunition was scarce. The resulting explosions were more amusing than threatening, but they perfectly captured the absurdity of being a colony abandoned by its empire. Historians still argue whether this coconut cannon tradition is exaggerated folklore or a genuine glimpse into the creativity of the times. The world outside Hispaniola was changing fast. Across Latin America, revolutions against Spain were erupting: Bolívar in the north, San Martín in the south, and each victory chipped away at the Spanish Empire. News of these uprisings traveled slowly but surely to Santo Domingo, carried by sailors and whispered through markets. You imagine a Dominican merchant leaning in close to a friend, murmuring, "If Venezuela can break free, why not us?" Yet the colony remained in limbo, caught between the shadow of Spain and the pull of its own emerging identity. Local leaders debated whether to declare independence to align with the United States or to seek some form of union with their Haitian neighbors. But hesitation ruled the day, and hesitation often invites outsiders to decide for you. As the 1820s drew to a close, the winds of change began to swirl more violently. Haiti under Boyer watched the East with keen eyes, aware of Spain's weakness and the opportunity it presented. You stand on the border once again, feeling the tension in the air, as though the mountains themselves know something is coming. The Spanish authorities, few in number and low in morale, seem oblivious to the storm building just over the horizon. The stage is set, the old empire is crumbling, the neighbors are restless, and the people of Santo Domingo are about to face a transformation that will test their loyalties, identities, and the very meaning of freedom. You stand at the edge of 1822 and the tension along the border finally bursts into action. Jean-Pierre Boyer, president of Haiti, leads his forces eastward, not with the blind chaos of conquest, but with a calculated mission to unify the island under one government, one vision, and one policy of freedom from slavery. You watch the Haitian army march in boots pounding the earth in rhythm banners waving high. For some in Santo Domingo, these soldiers were liberators. For others, they were invaders. But either way, there was no denying that change had arrived. The Haitian occupation of the East began without the bloody carnage one might expect. Spanish authority had become so weak that resistance was minimal, and Boyer's forces entered Santo Domingo almost unopposed. They abolished slavery immediately, a sweeping act that freed thousands and sent a message. The ideals born from Haiti's revolution would not be contained by borders. You breathe in the air of liberation, thick with both relief and uncertainty. Life under Haitian rule was complicated. Boyer implemented reforms. He redistributed some land, tried to standardize laws, and sought to integrate the East into Haiti's economic system. Yet these reforms, intended to unify, often alienated the Dominican population. The Haitian government imposed military service and taxes that felt heavy to a people already struggling. Spanish-language schools were neglected, Catholic Church privileges were reduced, and the East's cattle-based economy clashed with Haiti's more centralized policies. You can almost hear Dominican voices muttering in markets. They freed us, yes, but at what cost? Here's a quirky tidbit. During Boyer's rule, Haitian authorities ordered the cutting down of trees to export valuable timber, particularly mahogany. This practice angered many Dominicans, not just because of the environmental impact, but because locals had a superstition that certain old saber trees were home to spirits. Cutting them down was seen as inviting bad luck, an early example of how policy can clash with cultural belief. Historians still argue whether this resentment was primarily economic or spiritual, but either way the trees fell and tensions grew. Meanwhile, the Haitian occupation was not universally despised. Many freed people and poorer farmers embraced the end of slavery and the opportunity to own land. The occupation also kept European powers at bay, ensuring that Spain or France could not reimpose colonial control. But the elite and the church, both accustomed to privileges under Spanish rule, simmered with anger. This simmering would eventually boil over. For 22 years, the eastern side of Hispaniola remained under Haitian administration. Children grew up speaking Spanish but governed by Haitian laws. The border ceased to matter, at least on maps, as the island was politically united for the first and only time. Yet beneath the surface, cultural differences deepened. Dominicans held on tightly to their Spanish heritage, their Catholic traditions, their cattle ranching lifestyle, and their sense of being distinct from their Haitian rulers. You linger in a candle-lit room where Dominican conspirators whisper in secret, their voices trembling, not just with fear of Haitian authorities, but with the dangerous hope of rebellion. Among them is a young man named Juan Pablo Duarte, quietly laying the foundations for something bold. Outside, the streets seem calm, but the quiet is deceiving. Resentment and pride are stirring, and once stirred, they do not settle easily. The occupation that began with a promise of freedom would end with a dramatic break. You feel it building like the rumble of a distant storm. The island is still united by law, but in spirit it is already splitting apart. You slip into the 1830s when the Haitian flag still flew over Santo Domingo, but behind shuttered windows and closed doors, whispers of rebellion fluttered like candle flames. In these hushed rooms, you follow the quiet steps of Juan Pablo Duarte, a young man with eyes full of fire and a voice that carried dreams of independence. Born into a well-off merchant family, Duarte had studied in Europe, where he absorbed ideas about liberty, nationalism, and the rights of people to govern themselves. Returning home, he looked around and thought, why not us? He founded a secret society known as La Trinitaria, named for its 9 members who swore an oath of loyalty in groups of 3. They met in safe houses, disguising their gatherings as social visits or religious meetings. You can almost smell the wax from the candles they lit, hear the creak of wooden floors beneath their nervous feet. These young conspirators wrote plans on scraps of paper, burned the evidence, and dreamed of a day when the Dominican Republic would stand on its own, free from both Haitian control and the neglect of distant empires. Their goals were clear but dangerous: independence, sovereignty, and the creation of a nation built on Dominican identity. Yet not everyone agreed on how to achieve it. Some preferred negotiating autonomy with Haiti. Others believed foreign powers like France or Spain should be invited back as protectors. Duarte rejected both notions, insisting that only Dominicans could secure and defend their freedom. Historians still argue whether Duarte was more an idealist than a strategist, but ideals have a way of inspiring action even when plans are fragile. Quirky tidbit. One of the Trinitario's early meetings was allegedly interrupted by a nosy neighbor, forcing the members to pretend they were rehearsing for a play. They improvised lines on the spot, turning a near disaster into a bizarre performance. Whether true or not, the story captures the thin line they walked between courage and capture. As you drift through the streets of Santo Domingo at night, you sense both the danger and the growing resolve. Duarte and his companions spread their ideas quietly, recruiting allies among students, merchants, and even some sympathetic soldiers. They painted slogans, distributed pamphlets, and used church bells as signals. Ordinary objects turned into tools of rebellion. The Haitian authorities, for their part, tightened their grip. Spies lurked everywhere, and those caught plotting independence faced prison or exile. Duarte himself was forced to leave for Venezuela in 1843 when Haitian officials caught wind of his activities. But exile did not crush his dream. It only sent him gathering support abroad, while his followers kept the flame alive at home. The island was restless. Boya, who had ruled Haiti for decades, was overthrown in 1843, and Haiti's own political turmoil created cracks in its control over the east. Duarte's followers seized the moment, planning not just a revolt, but a declaration, something bold enough to announce to the world, "We are here and we are free." You linger in a shadowed alley where the conspirators huddle one last time, voices low but steady. They know the risks: they could fail, they could die, but the pull of freedom is stronger than fear. You feel the tension rising like the tide. Soon the island will hear a sound it has never heard before, the cry of a new nation being born. You step softly into the night of February 27, 1844, when Santo Domingo holds its breath, knowing something extraordinary is about to happen. The city is cloaked in darkness, save for flickers of lanterns and the moonlight glinting off the walls of the Puerta del Conde. The Trinitarios, now joined by other patriots like Francisco del Rosario Sanchez and Matias Ramon Mella, move through the shadows. Duarte, still in exile, is not here physically, but his vision burns in every heart. You feel the tension in the air, the heartbeat of a city on the brink of rebirth. Suddenly the silence breaks. Mella fires a blunderbuss into the night sky, its booming echo rolling across the city like thunder. This single shot is not one of war, but of awakening, a signal that the revolution has begun. Cannons roar soon after, startling birds into flight. On the walls, the Dominican flag, newly stitched across, dividing blue and red, rises defiantly, and voices ring out in unison: Dios Patria, y Libertad, God, Fatherland, and Liberty. You can almost hear the cheers mixing with the crackle of gunpowder, the tremor of a people claiming their destiny. The Haitian garrison stationed in the city is caught off guard. Rather than a bloody confrontation, they quickly retreat, unable to mount a coordinated defense against the overwhelming local uprising. The rebels move swiftly, securing key positions, lowering the Haitian flag, and announcing to the world that the Dominican Republic now exists as a sovereign nation. You feel the ground hum under your feet as if the earth itself approves. But independence is never just a single night's victory. Even as celebrations erupt, the new republic faces immediate challenges, building a government defending against inevitable retaliation and convincing foreign powers they are more than a fragile dream. The leaders form a provisional government with Tomas Bobadilla heading the governing junta, and they begin organizing defenses, for they know Haiti will not simply accept this loss. Here's a quirky tidbit: on the very night of the declaration, some conspirators reportedly forgot to bring enough ammunition. They used noise, shouting, and even banging on pots to make their numbers seem larger than they were. Historians still argue whether this clever bluff truly scared the Haitian forces away, or if the garrison had already decided not to fight, but either way, the sound of pots and pans became an unlikely soundtrack to independence. The city celebrates with a mixture of joy and disbelief. People pour into the streets, lighting candles, singing hymns, and hugging strangers. Yet beneath the jubilation lies a quiet anxiety. Will this freedom last? You imagine a Dominican mother holding her child close, whispering prayers that this new flag will not be torn down as quickly as it was raised. As dawn breaks, the sun paints the sky over Santo Domingo in shades of red and gold. Smoke still lingers from the cannons, mingling with the salty sea air. The people, weary but unbroken, stand together, gazing at their new flag fluttering proudly. The island has changed forever. The Dominican Republic is born, and its cry of independence has just shaken Hispaniola's history to its core. You step into the bright but uneasy morning that follows independence, when the newborn Dominican Republic finds itself surrounded by uncertainty. The joy of February 27, 1844 quickly hardens into vigilance, because across the border, Haitian forces are gathering. You feel the tension as Dominican soldiers, many of them farmers who only recently put down their plows, now sharpen machetes and clean muskets, knowing the fight for freedom has only just begun. President Charles Rivière Hérard of Haiti wastes no time. In March 1844, he launches an invasion to reclaim the East, leading a large army that outnumbers the Dominican defenders. Yet numbers aren't everything. You hear the echo of battle cries at Azua on March 19th, where Dominican forces under General Pedro Santana hold their ground against all odds, repelling the Haitian army with fierce resistance and clever use of terrain. Smoke and dust fill the air, and as the Haitian troops retreat, the defenders realize they have achieved something extraordinary, their first victory as an independent people. The war does not end there. Haitian armies strike again and again over the next few years, but each time Dominican forces push them back in Santiago, at the Battle of March 30th here in El Número, and in Las Carreras. You march alongside these fighters, their boots worn, their uniforms ragged, but their spirit unbreakable. Every victory strengthens the young republic's identity, proving to themselves and the world that they are not just rebels, but a nation willing to defend its freedom with blood and grit. Life beyond the battlefield is equally challenging. The new government struggles to unify its people, draft laws, and build institutions while constantly preparing for the next Haitian attack. Duarte returns from exile briefly, only to find political infighting already fracturing the leadership. Santana, a strongman with a talent for war but a taste for power, rises as a key figure, overshadowing Duarte's ideals of democratic governance. Historians still argue whether Santana was a savior who secured independence, or a caudillo who traded freedom for stability. Here's a quirky tidbit: during one of the Haitian invasions, Dominican troops reportedly used cattle as a battlefield weapon, driving herds toward enemy lines to create chaos. It sounds almost absurd, but imagine the panic of soldiers facing a wall of stampeding horns. It worked at least enough to buy time. The fighting also shapes Dominican identity in ways deeper than politics. The contrast with Haiti becomes a central part of how Dominicans see themselves, Spanish-speaking Catholic and culturally distinct from their Western neighbors. This sense of difference, once subtle, now becomes a rallying cry. You sense it in their songs, their prayers, their determination to preserve what they believe makes them who they are. The Haitian government, strained by its own internal turmoil and economic hardships, eventually reduces its attempts to reclaim the East. Each failed invasion leaves Haiti weaker and the Dominican Republic stronger. Yet the border remains tense, a line of both separation and connection, where trade, smuggling, and occasional skirmishes blur the edges of two nations forced to share an island. By the late 1840s, the Dominican Republic has survived its first great test. Its people, hardened by war, begin to believe their independence might endure after all. You watch them rebuild cities, replant fields, and breathe a cautious sigh of relief. The cannons fall silent for now, but the young republic will soon face another storm, one not from Haiti this time, but from its own doubts and the shadows of old empires waiting to return. You step into the 1860s, where the Dominican Republic, though scarred by years of war, is still standing, but its independence feels fragile, like a candle flickering in the wind. The country's leaders face an unsettling reality. Their army is exhausted, their economy is in tatters, and powerful neighbors watch with interest. Into this uncertain stage walks Pedro Santana again, the general who had fought bravely against Haitian invasions, but whose love for control overshadows his loyalty to democratic ideals. You watch him pace in a dimly lit room, plotting what he believes is salvation for his nation. In 1861, Santana makes a shocking move. Without consulting the people, he signs a pact to return the Dominican Republic to Spanish rule, claiming it will protect the country from Haitian aggression and economic collapse. You hear the stunned silence in the streets when the Spanish flag rises once more over Santo Domingo. Some sigh in relief, believing Spain's power will bring stability. Others seethe with anger, feeling betrayed that their hard-won independence has been sold away so easily. Historians still argue whether Santana acted out of desperation or ambition, but either way, the decision sparks a storm. Spain arrives not as a gentle protector, but as a heavy-handed master. They impose new taxes, conscript men into service, and govern with little regard for Dominican voices. The church regains privileges, Spanish officials take key positions, and resentment simmers like a pot left too long on the fire. You can almost hear whispers in taverns, "We fought so hard to be free, and now we're back where we started." And then rebellion ignites once more. In 1863, a small uprising at Capotillo, the famed Grito de Capotillo, sets off the War of Restoration. You watch as rebels raise the Dominican flag again, shouting defiance, and launch a guerrilla war against Spanish troops. The fighting is brutal, the forests echoing with musket fire and cries of "Viva la República Dominicana." Civilians suffer, but they support the rebels, hiding them, feeding them, and praying for their victory. Here's a quirky tidbit: during this war, rebels reportedly used horns and conch shells to mimic larger armies moving through the hills, confusing Spanish forces into retreating from battles they might have won. It was a clever trick, proving once again that sometimes noise can be as powerful as bullets. The conflict drags on for 2 years, bleeding Spain's resources and morale. The Spanish soldiers, unprepared for the relentless heat disease and hit-and-run tactics of the rebels, grow weary and demoralized. Back in Madrid, officials wonder why they are wasting money and lives on a colony that brings more headaches than profit. Finally, in 1865, Spain withdraws completely, abandoning its attempt to reclaim Hispaniola's east. Independence is restored this time not through declarations or treaties, but through stubborn, bloody resistance. As you stand on a hill overlooking the land, you see the Dominican flag rise again, fluttering against a backdrop of smoke and sunlight. The people have proven for the second time that their freedom is not a gift to be given or taken. It is something they will fight for endlessly. You can almost hear their exhausted but triumphant voices. We are free, and this time we decide our fate. The Spanish departure leaves the country battered but unbroken, standing alone in the Caribbean, with its identity sharper than ever. The years ahead will still hold turmoil, but the spirit forged in these fires will not easily fade. You step back, feeling the island itself exhale, knowing that it has shaken off yet another set of chains. You move into the late 19th century, where the dust of wars begins to settle and the Dominican Republic finally stands firmly on its own, though its wounds still ache. The battles with Haiti have ended, Spain has been driven away, and the people now look inward to rebuild a country that has been burned, battered, and reborn multiple times in just a few decades. You walk through fields where farmers replant crops, through towns where schools slowly reopen, and through ports where merchants dream of prosperity returning. The independence that seemed fragile now feels like a quiet but enduring flame. Yet peace does not mean calm. The young republic still faces political chaos as leaders rise and fall with dizzying speed. Caudillo's strongmen like Buenaventura Baez trade power back and forth, sometimes seeking alliances with foreign powers, sometimes even proposing new annexations to countries like the United States. You hear people groan in frustration. Did we fight so hard to trade one master for another? Historians still argue whether these attempts to seek foreign protection were pragmatic survival or a betrayal of sovereignty, but the people's answer is clear every time they fight to keep the nation theirs. The border with Haiti remains a line of both tension and connection. Trade flows, families cross, and cultures mingle, but mistrust lingers. Two nations share the same island, yet they remain profoundly different, shaped by different languages, histories, and struggles. The past wars have etched deep scars, but they also forged identities that neither side can erase. You can almost feel the island itself divided yet intertwined, as if the mountains and rivers know they belong to one land, even when its people draw boundaries. Here's a quirky tidbit. In the decades after independence, some Dominican villages held yearly mock battles where one group would play Haitians and the other Dominicans, ending with a celebratory feast. These events were half ritual, half party, a strange blend of memory and merriment. They show how even painful history can turn into something that binds communities together, not just divides them. As the century draws to a close, the Dominican Republic is no longer a fragile experiment. It is a nation that has survived colonial neglect, revolutionary storms, foreign occupations, and the test of its own divisions. Its independence has been defended not once but twice, proving to all who would challenge it that the Dominican spirit is as resilient as the saber trees that once stood defiant against axes. You stand on a cliff overlooking the Caribbean Sea, where the waves crash endlessly against the rocks. The sun sets slowly, painting the sky in colors so vivid they almost hum. In that light, the island of Hispaniola seems to glow, two nations on one land, each with its own story, yet forever bound by a shared geography and a history that shook the world more than once. The legacy of Dominican independence is not just a date on a calendar. It's a feeling in the air, a stubborn heartbeat that whispers to every generation, freedom is never handed to you. You have to claim it, defend it, and hold it close. And even when storms come again, as they surely will, that heartbeat keeps going. You linger a while longer, letting the sound of the waves blend with the faint memory of drums, cannons, and voices calling for liberty. The night deepens, the stars return, and the island sleeps divided by borders, yes, but united in the endless rhythm of history. And now, as the story fades, you breathe slower, softer, letting the weight of centuries drift away like mist over the sea. You picture the island resting beneath the moon, its mountains silhouetted against the sky, its forests whispering with the night wind. The struggles, the battles, the cries of freedom, all of them become distant echoes like waves breaking gently on a faraway shore. You imagine walking barefoot on the sand, the grains warm from the day's sun but cooling under the stars. Each step feels lighter than the last. The ocean hums a lullaby, steady and timeless, as if it has seen all these stories before and will see them again long after you drift to sleep. The salt in the air softens, blending with the scent of flowers carried from the hills, wrapping around you like a blanket. The heroes you met tonight, Duarte Sanchez, Mela Santana, fade into silhouettes against the glow of history. Their voices calm now, no longer shouting, but murmuring softly, reminding you that even in chaos, courage can bloom. The flags stop waving, the cannons fall silent, and the fires of war turn to the warm glow of lanterns in quiet homes. The island's heartbeat slows, and so does yours. You feel your eyelids grow heavy, your breathing deep, and even as the story dissolves into a calm night sky sprinkled with stars, all is quiet, all is safe, all is still. You let the final images fade, a flag gently swaying in a breeze, the sea glistening under moonlight, and a sense of peace wrapping around you like a soft whisper.